Joining us now is the person responsible for this celebration that we call Notre Dame Day. For nearly 2 decades now, Nanni has served his alma mater valiantly as its vice president for university relations. Lou, welcome to the last few minutes of this edition of Notre Dame Day. We've now done this for 8 years, and you have often said this is your favorite 29 hours of the year. Why is that? Why is this so important?
First of all, it's a little far-fetched to say I'm responsible. I'm the beneficiary. There's so many others that make this happen, beginning with you. And I want to thank you, Jack. Your legacy and your service to Our Lady's University is unmatched. And we are humbled. We're deeply moved to have you back here in one of your final kind of work sessions here before you wrap things up. But somehow, we're going to keep asking you to come back, on a retirement and to help us out. But we again, you've always carried yourself with incredible class and dignity and amazing generosity to others. So my heartfelt thanks to you for that. I love this because of the storytelling. Every year, I'm amazed to see the number of students and faculty members and alumni and parents and friends who step up and in their love for Notre Dame are testifying to a love that is what this place is all about. They're giving back to others. They're making a difference. They're living out their own dreams. But all of it's other-centered. It's God-centered, and it's making a difference in this world. And the fact that so many people rally together and so generously step up to support the Student Emergency Relief Fund, to the Arab Parsegan Medical Foundation, to the Frisbee Club. I mean, it's all over the gamut, and it's really it's quite amazing just to sit back and watch it all unfold.
You know, when I first did this, I kind of compared it to the Jerry Lewis Telethon, which I actually used to do for WNDU, and they carried it a little bit.
Did you? Wow.
But we don't ask really overtly for money. We have a tote board, but it's just storytelling, and the Notre Dame community responds. And no other school seems to be able to do this. Why do you think that is?
You know, I think it goes back to the experiences that people had when they're students here. We're the beneficiaries of that, right? It's the rector who went out of their way when somebody down the hall got sick and they accompanied them to the emergency room and were attentive. It's the professor, who gives that extension and is incredibly compassionate. It's the cleaning lady in the dorm that you develop a deep relationship with, who goes out of the way to kind of help you out. It's those things that we remember over time, or you see that being done for your child as a Notre Dame parent, and so people want to step up and give back to that. They believe in the place, the ethos of the place, of the community, and it makes people want to give back. And we're so blessed and so fortunate to have so many people step up. It doesn't matter if it's a gift. What I love about this day, it's not the size of the gift. It's all about participation. So it doesn't matter if you give $1 or $5 or $500. It's about giving back. And that's what the whole spirit of the day is about.
Because of the pandemic, we've done a fewer live hours this year.
Yeah.
And yet I understand that the giving is up, which is a tribute again to the Notre Dame family. But you always are so humble. You just come on the end to talk a little bit. But since the pandemic began, every Wednesday, you're in this seat and you're interviewing people, Notre Dame people with stories all across the country. Do you plan to keep doing that? Because some of them have been really interesting. So
I have learned very quickly, and many people have told me, don't quit your day job. So I am not the professional. I don't do it like you do it, and Justine and so many others do it effortlessly. So I've been humbled by that process. But in doing what I do, I love to ask questions, and I love to learn and grow, from the people that I get a chance to interview. So yes, we did do it initially when the pandemic began and nobody knew what was happening and everything was still. And we wanted to keep the Notre Dame family close to its family members. And we started out by interviewing leaders, Father John and Tom Burrish, and then his successor, Mary Lynn Miranda and Shannon Cullinan, and even John Affleck Graves before he left. And then people were watching in big numbers and sending in all kinds of questions. So we've gone on to interview faculty members and students. It's been just a real blessing to see so many people continuing to follow Notre Dame in such passionate ways.
You know, you just gave a nugget that should be in an FTT class, because that's all a good interview is.
Yeah.
It's a conversation
Yeah.
between people. And you've had some very interesting ones. Recently, you had one that was literally from outer space.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about talking to astronaut Mike Hopkins.
Yeah, what an incredible. Jim Small, who's really the mastermind behind all of this. Jim's the one in July who contacted NASA and said, could we work this thing out? And it was incredibly complicated to line up the satellites. When they had to be over South Africa at the time, we had 22-minute window. And, Mike is a Notre Dame parent. And he's the commander of the space station, about to return after a second 6-month tour of duty. Just an amazing human being. And to see him floating around in space as he was answering these questions, probably for me the most moving part of that interview was at the end, when we had a little time to fill, and I told him about Father Ted's dream. And Father Ted, who desperately wanted to travel to space, and his dream behind that was he wanted to be the first priest to celebrate the Eucharist in outer space, to bring Christ to the universe beyond Earth. And he had figured out the whole way in which he was going to do that. And I mentioned that toward the end of the interview, and Mike Hopkins responded and said, I have consecrated Eucharists with me.
Wow.
And he says, before I go out to do a spacewalk or to do some repairs externally on the space station, some of the more dangerous things we do, I take the Eucharist. And I know that Christ is with me in the times that are most scary. And, it was a part of the interview that we didn't expect to unfold that way, and it was deeply moving.
You got goosebumps, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Still
when you
do.
know.
Yeah.
That's when you know you've done a great interview.
Yeah.
And you've expanded it now to even current Notre Dame students. This past week, you interviewed a Notre Dame senior from Texas by the name of Emily Eagle. Tell us about her.
What an amazing young woman. And in all of these interviews, as many of the clips from Notre Dame Day too, go to the ND Loyal YouTube page. And you can find them all here. And Emily is one of the most, and it's so incredible about working at a university is you get to be inspired and humbled on a regular basis by people who are far younger than you. And Emily just exudes a holiness. She is God-centered. She is other-centered. You just got to hear her story. She is blind. She lost her eyesight between the ages of 5 and 10. She came to Notre Dame accompanied by her, seeing eye dog, Rebel. And she's now an RA in Howard Hall. And to listen to this young woman talk about why she is so proud to be a blind woman. Because in her brokenness, she has learned empathy, and she has also gained a resilience and a call to serve and reach out to others who have different disabilities. Really, one of the most inspiring interviews I've ever had a chance to be a part of. And it reminds me of a shared friend, a classmate of mine, Louis Samogi, who just tragically died. I mean, this is a guy who not only was one of the great Notre Dame sports writers, but he's a person who exudes holiness. This was a man who was good to the core and always had a great word, compassionate to others. And, we're so lucky to be around people like this, like Emily and Louis, that make you not only want to do your job better, but to be a better human being, to live out your own faith more fully.
One of the nicest men I have ever met, and no one who has covered Notre Dame has not benefited or been helped by Lou Samogi. I mean, I'm right here, 58 years old. It's hard to process that.
Yeah.
And this is a tough segue because we're going to talk about something cheerful now. But Lou would want us to be happy.
Yeah.
And one of the great tenets of the Catholic faith is literally breaking bread.
Yes.
So another thing you're doing now is an interview called Fighting Irish Foodies. Talk about where that came from, and that may be one of the most popular things you're doing right now.
It is crazy. I'm not a cook, and my wife, my mother, everybody would tell you right from the start. So there's a tremendous irony in me interviewing these incredible chefs at Notre Dame. Many of these chefs have won all kinds of food competitions, cooking competitions on the Food Network and so on and so forth. We have them here at Notre Dame, and they design their own recipes, and then we cook them together, and they explain them, and I get to ask them questions about food and cooking at restaurants in South Bend that they love, and it's been really interesting. But I'm there, I think, for comedic relief. I ask obtuse questions so nobody can know less than I know about this process. My mom has watched the first show where we made Guinness stew at least 7 times. I think she's wet her pants laughing at some of the stupid questions I made and how I dropped the carrot as I was trying to skin, So one time I said to Father John, it feels like I'm always in this situation where I'm playing the role of the buffoon. And Father John said to me, yes, but it comes so naturally.
Yes.
He's quick. He's always quick-witted with that.
I've been made part of the Notre Dame family, and I'm so blessed. But I went to Missouri, and we have a journalism school, Missouri Mafia. That's the Alumni Association of the journalism school. I grew up in Boston with all the Ivy League schools and MIT and their alumni associations. But there's no alumni association. When people ask me one of the things that separates Notre Dame, there is no alumni association like Notre Dame's. I was in Oslo, Norway about 15 years ago, driving down the street, and we drove by the storefront of the Notre Dame Alumni Club of Oslo. Yeah. It's everywhere. Yeah. You oversee the Alumni Association. Why is this Alumni Association so active and so strong and so productive in terms of not only helping this school, but helping society?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, we are so blessed. We have 292 Notre Dame alumni clubs. We actually don't call them alumni clubs. We call them Notre Dame clubs, right? And about 220 of them are domestic, and the rest are around the world. The Notre Dame Club of Baghdad, Oslo, they're all over the place. And people come together to do service locally. They come together to raise money for scholarship funds that supplement what the Notre Dame gives, Notre Dame Financial Aid Office gives to students to help them from their own areas to attend Notre Dame. They do all kinds of projects to celebrate Notre Dame and to live out the values of Notre Dame, but to serve locally their constituencies in heroic ways. It's amazing. We have a club in Gettysburg that is one of our most celebrated clubs. It has 110 members, and 100 of them are not alumni. It is just amazing when you go around and visit these clubs. These are people who bleed blue and gold. They love Notre Dame, and this is a way for them to participate in the dream, and it's a way that keeps Notre Dame alive. And 85% of these clubs every year, notwithstanding COVID, has a Notre Dame speaker who travels to give kind of a state of the university update and answer questions. So they stay really close. They're the arms and legs. There's a soul of Notre Dame as we try to be a force for good in the world.
And another thing about the clubs is they're competitive. And maybe that stems from the athletic department and all the great teams here, going back to Newt Rockne and the football program. So they will give more and more just to give more than their fellow clubs. And for this particular event, you have some families who have now come together to kind of just stir the pot a little bit, to get everybody off and giving by contributing right now, donating a $500,000 challenge fund that you've divided into 2 groups. Can you tell us who those people are and how that came about?
Yeah, I mean, we're just so blessed. Jim Burgess, class of '69, from the St. Louis area, is on our Mendoza College of Business Advisory Council. Jim has, year in and year out, very generously stepped up to provide the matching dollars that all of these student clubs and academic units and sports teams and alumni clubs, participate for. Bill and Linda Hoagland, Notre Dame parents of a sophomore here currently, have stepped up very generously. And then Father John has a number of folks who contribute to his President's Circle and Kavanaugh Council, gifts of $25,000 and $50,000 that at the end of the year, Father John collects these resources and allocates them to the kind of highest priorities, needs, and opportunities. And he has taken some of that money and provided that from many people as matching funds. So we're so blessed that that money stretches the support that we can give in addition to the outright gifts that people make to the clubs, here through Notre Dame Day.
The next person who's about to appear here is Chloe Agnew,
Yeah.
who has become part of the fabric of Notre Dame. And of course, she's a brilliant singer,
She is.
but she even stepped up more this year. She actually sat in this chair and helped host the show. Talk about her and how she has become part of the Notre Dame family.
Yeah, no, we're so blessed by Chloe. It's, she's been here she actually flew during the pandemic from Dublin to make it here to be with us in person. I mean, the sacrifices that people make is just, I can't emphasize enough how humbling and how inspiring it is. To have, one of the original Celtic singers, the leaders who has branched off to have just a terrific career as a singer, but comes from a family. Her mother is a very prominent talk show host and television personality in Ireland. So she comes by this naturally, and to have her doing both, the hosting as well as the singing here, is a blessing beyond measure.
And as we wrap this up, talk a little bit about just what this campus has done, your department has done, but the student body has done. There was a little pandemic hiccup back at the beginning of this year. And since that time, everybody's pulled together. And unless you're part of it, and I've been blessed to be part of it, I was in the Notre Dame bubble for basketball, so I saw what they did there. The athletic teams have been able to compete with very few interruptions, but everybody's been able to get their academic work done, and you brought people back on campus. But it was so hard.
Yep, it was hard.
Yeah.
And, I try to remind our students from time to time, because I've been working with our off-campus students in particular, and at the request of Father John. Father John made a courageous decision to be one of the first major universities in the country to welcome back the entire student body for in-person classes. And everybody said, wow, this is courageous, this is courageous. Well, it's courageous for one reason. It was difficult. We, as you said, had our setbacks along the way, but we persevered, and everybody rallied together. I can tell you that 40% of our department in development and alumni relations worked in the COVID response unit. I mean, everybody from throughout this university stepped up and took on additional or just changed jobs for the past year and a half to support our students. It's been taxing. Our revenues have been down from sports. I mean, the Morris Inn was converted into basically beds for students that were isolated or quarantined, and the bookstore. All the revenues have been down. We've spent about an additional $40 million on testing and all kinds of other COVID response, the tents, everything that we put on campus to try to accommodate students. We'll see about a $130 million deficit this year, but every dollar, every drop of sweat that has been worth it. And we're close to the end of completing a year, and we're going to be the only school I know among the top 20 that is going to have an in-person commencement ceremony where we're going to be able to welcome at least 2 members of each graduate's family back. Almost nobody is doing anything like that. And so we've been at the cutting edge of doing this. It has not been easy, but we've been able to make it through. And without, thanks to God's graces, anybody being lost or anybody suffering any, tremendous hardship along the way. We've been really fortunate and blessed, but a lot of work has gone into that.
And a student body that was committed, you know this, Notre Dame's hard.
Yeah.
And one thing that makes Notre Dame stand out, and not just for athletes, but for every student, just showing up in class and being polite, that doesn't get it done here. Your professors are going to challenge you. You're going to be challenged. So you work hard, you play hard. But this year, the students couldn't play hard. They had to give up that part of student life. And that made it much harder. And I've been impressed how they did it, and did it as cheerfully as they could, and fought through the difficult times. So the university provided the groundwork for it, but they had to follow through, and they're a big part of this too.
We made it for one reason. The students wanted to be here and did not want to go home. So they sucked it up. They made the sacrifices. They followed the rules. They so wanted to make it happen. Their desire to be here and the sacrifices that they made and the hardship that they endured is why we're still here today. They're the champions of the success that we've enjoyed.
So as we get ready to wrap up another successful ND Day, what is next in terms of challenges for the Notre Dame Development Department to help the mission of Notre Dame?
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's really important to focus on where your question just ended, the mission of Notre Dame. The mission of Notre Dame is not about Notre Dame. Father Soren said that we're going to build one of the greatest Catholic universities in the land, and more importantly, one of the greatest forces for good in all of society. 6% of the world's population has a college degree. At the University of Notre Dame, if we're not asking ourselves every day, how are we making ourselves relevant to the other 94% of the world's population, then we've missed the boat. Our fundamental mission is to help develop the full God-given potential of our Notre Dame students intellectually, emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, for one primary reason, so they can go forth as graduates of this institution and transform the jangling discord of this world into a more harmonic symphony. They make a difference through their careers, by being good husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, whatever their personal calling might be, leading lives of integrity and service. And they do that, and we are so blessed by that. But there's another calling beyond that, and that calling is that through our research and through our example as an institution, that what we do is impacting real-world problems. In a sense, as Notre Dame evolves more and more, it's less and less about Notre Dame, and it's more and more about becoming a conduit through which we can impact real-world problems. Poverty in Africa, how to build cities that are more livable, how to enact greater areas of conflict resolution, how to come up with cures for rare and neglected diseases. All of these and so much more are fundamental to the mission of Notre Dame. And when we understand that the mission of Notre Dame is really not about us, but it's about God and others, then we understand why it's so worthy to give our lives and to give our resources to serve a mission that is that God-centered and other-centered.
Lou, thank you for the time tonight and all you do. And a point of personal privilege here, thank you for how wonderful you have been to me. It has been my privilege to be here for 39 years. And I'll say this, Notre Dame is not easy. No. It's not easy to work here either. Yeah. But I'm blessed to be here, and I've stayed here when people have asked me, and it's because of the people of Notre Dame. That's what makes this place great. And I'm so blessed to have been able to spend time with all of these great Notre Dame people over the years.
We love you, Jack, and we're grateful for you.
Thank you.